I'm Mark Gagan, and you're listening to a special episode of the Voice of Insurance podcast, produced in association with Ebix Europe. Today's guest has been working on implanting the best technology into the London market since the days when computer screens only displayed varying shades of green. He's someone who I have known for 20 years and have come to rely upon to unpack all the jargon, spell out the acronyms, and explain in layman's terms what's really happening in the ongoing process of London market technological reform. This is because Jeff Ward, the sales director of Ebix Europe, is very wise, very patient, and also very good company. He also has clear, common sense opinions and is good at giving logical, concise answers to complex questions, when others might end up over-elaborating or indeed oversimplifying. In short, Jeff Ward is a market gem and an invaluable friend to help navigate the complex process of digitisation in which the market currently finds itself. Ebix Europe was behind the first iteration of PPL and is now in the market with the latest generation of that market pioneer, a sophisticated digital placing system called Placing Hub. As we sit on the cusp of a genuine revolution in the way global business is to be transacted, Jeff outlines how the world of electronic placing is likely to develop and explains the genuine complexity of the re-engineering of London's core accounting and settlement systems in the first phase of the Blueprint 2 reforms. He also explains how adoption of data-first standards is fundamental, outlines why early attempts to change brokers and underwriters' time-worn behaviour during the quoting and placing process did not succeed, and looks at the best use cases and probable limitations of AI in insurance. I highly recommend you take the next 45 minutes to meet Jeff Ward, my great insurance technology friend and guide. I'm absolutely certain that in no time he'll become yours too. Enjoy the podcast. Jeff, welcome to the Voice of Insurance.
Thanks very much for having me.
It's really good to see you. It's nice to see you back in the market.
Thank you, yes. I recently rejoined at the beginning of this year after spending 8 years in glorious semi-retirement, which I have to say I wasn't enjoying very much.
Well, anyone who doesn't know you, I think everyone should know you, Jeff. I've known you for a very long time, 20 years now covering the insurance market, and I've known you from day one. But anyone out there listening who doesn't know you, can you give us a potted run through of your career and how you got into the insurance market? I remember this story myself, so I know it's quite an interesting one. And then how you've managed to come back into the market and sit where you are now.
Yes, so I'd started in the market in 1989. Then the 10 years prior to that, I had a sort of hybrid career of being a computer programmer and being a sound recording engineer, running my own recording studio. And we decided to close the studio in 1989. And literally the day after we closed it, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who was IT director of a very large London market underwriter, company's market underwriter, saying, I don't suppose you've got any spare time, Jeff. We need some computer programming doing. So literally the next day, I didn't have a suit or anything, but I went to work for a very well-established and long-trading insurance company on Fenchurch Street, which started my love for the London insurance market and technology in it.
It was quite go-ahead then, because that company was turning the paper electronic, at least.
Yes.
Scanning the documents rather than just photocopying them.
It was. They got 2 projects underway whilst I was there, and I was fortunate enough to lead one of them. The first project, which was being done by a colleague, was basically document image processing, which for 1989-1990 was very, very go-ahead. They've got rid of the paper and they backscanned, 135,000 policy files into an enormous image processing system, and they put these huge monitors on all the underwriters' desks. So that was the first thing. And the one I was responsible for was post-bind electronic accounting and settlement and claims, which predated the core GRLC standard by some 10 years. And we got that running with a couple of really big broking firms, and they did all of their post-bind stuff electronically. Of course, that was in days when you had to dial up modems, what was it, 16 kilobits or something like that. So,
Well, we were always a bit down on London market technology, but that was the first time I saw documents being scanned electronically and suddenly appearing miraculously on a screen. And also, of course, the London market was the first time I'd ever seen a proper modem, sort of boing-boing modem in action. In my office, it was for our claims team to use LimNet to advise the market on claims. We were often a bit hard on ourselves. So moving on from then.
I joined a fledgling IT company called Tri-Systems, and we were basically a London market IT shop doing developments and support on good old-fashioned green screen technology for a number of underwriting companies, which was good. And we grew that slowly but surely into a more modern sort of technological company. We got ourselves involved in electronic trading, during the 2000s, and we followed the Accord standards and built endorsement trading systems and a platform called limestreet.com, which was very successful. And after that, we sold the business in 2012 to Ebix and went on to provide all the technology to PPL for the electronic trading platform that they used up until 2024.
So it's bringing you reasonably up to date. But you left the business. Are you
Yes.
Enjoying an early retirement?
Yes, I left the
labours?
business in 2016 after an illness. I had to leave, which was a bit of a shame because I missed the go live of PPL, which was a bit disappointing after spending quite a lot of my career working up to that. Nonetheless, that was all successful. And so I thought I'd have a go at retiring, and not massively successful. I sort of missed the cut and thrust and the working with teams and stuff, which I really like doing. That's teams full of people rather than teams, the software, which I'm not so keen on. So I went to work for LM Tom in 2018.
And that was the London market target operating model.
The target operating model, I suppose the spiritual predecessor to Future at Lloyd's Blueprint 2.
Yes.
Not a hugely successful project, but some good came out of it.
I've still got my badge, I think. It's I'm with Tom on one of my old jackets in the back of my
marketing
cupboard.
was quite good. But anyway, I'm not here to criticise markets' attempts at modernisation. And so, yes, and I did some consulting after that. And then Ebix went into Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, the head office, the American parent company, during 2024, which was not great. And when they got sold to a venture capital company in India, new management, new investment coming into the company, I got a phone call from Ebix Europe saying, "Would you like to come back, Jeff?" And I thought, fine, yeah, that sounds like something I want to do.
So we're back up to date. So Ebix Europe, 6-7 years after you were last here. What should we know you for? What are your star products?
Star products of the company. Well, we are known for two things predominantly. I think the electronic trading stuff is the first one. We provided all that technology to the market for 7 years prior. For PPL, electronic trading, we've now got a product called Placing Hub, which is the successor to the PPL technology. Very, very new user experience. It's got all the data first stuff and everything else, contract builder, all the modern stuff. But on the other side, we've got a thing called Exposure Hub, which is an exposure management system predominantly for underwriting companies. So we've got two strings to our bow now, which is good. And they're both doing very well. So they're quite easy products to sell because they've been very nicely developed, none of which is anything to do with me because it all happened when I wasn't here.
Yeah, but you know what good looks like.
Well, yes, I think I've got a reasonable idea. Pretty good stuff.
Anything else that you're working on?
I think the most important aspects of our strategy is to take advantage of the fact that we're in a larger group of insurance technology companies that are part of the Ebix empire throughout the world. Never really successfully managed to do that 10 years ago. And we're having another shot now with the support of the new owners, which allows us to consider integrating our products to other products that are being used in other territories. For example, broking administration systems that we sell, we can integrate that into our accounting and settlement systems and our placing systems. So we're looking at a much more global view rather than just parochially being a London market technology vendor.
So it is right to say you're not really just a London specialty insurance.
We are not
software
just
company.
a London technology specialist. We are, without question of doubt, our heritage is London insurance market, and we understand this market extremely well and have been here for 30 years. But our aspiration and our strategy is to move further afield, whilst not leaving London behind, of course, but it's to expand further afield.
We should be watching this space in terms of you bringing products to market from other parts of the group into the London market and vice versa.
It is absolutely that and vice versa. So the new owners of the company want to be able to do that sort of cross-selling within the company, something that never really we managed before under the previous regime, and now it's being distinctly encouraged.
Coming back to London, more parochial matters in London, I've known you for 20 years, and we've been talking about London market reform all that time, and a long time before that, actually. And you've been right at the heart of it with the LM Tom. This time around, we've had a few delays on Blueprint 2. We've got what looks, on the face of it, much more realistic deadline, a set of expectations around delivery. Do you think we're definitely going to have it all working this time next year?
Well, first of all, I think we need to establish what it all working actually means.
Yes.
So first of all, the Blueprint 2 was divided into two phases. We have the first phase, which is the re-engineering of the bureau systems. And I can't remember how many there are, 13 or something. Bureau systems that date back to sometime around Charles Dickens' era. And that's all having to be completely rebuilt. But it's being rebuilt in such a way as to not affect the practitioner companies pretty much at all. So that when those go in, there will be virtually no change to the way that the brokers and underwriters interface to and integrate to those systems. To me, that is the most fantastically important aspect of the project. It is something that has been delayed. I have nothing but sympathy for the people who are running that project, because our heritage here at Ebix is in green screen applications going all the way back to the 1980s. We have a fairly thorough understanding of how that stuff works, and it's not particularly easy. It is very, very difficult to take a legacy system and re-engineer it.
It's some of the failings, it's not fair to call them failings, they're not failings, they're just delays. Is it really because people tend to underestimate how complicated some of these systems are?
I suppose there's a degree of that, but what we're talking about here is a legacy of systems that have been developed and then added to and changed over a period of 30 years. Specifications don't necessarily exist. A lot of the knowledge is tied up in individuals who now no longer work in the market and all that sort of thing. So it's very difficult to re-engineer a system, reading the source code and trying to understand what's intended, then replicating that in a completely different technology. It's not a job that I would like to do at all, but it is probably the most important job that the London market has to do. We can't, and I don't think anybody could disagree with this, but we can't go on with that legacy single point of failure in the market's central bureau systems. It simply can't be allowed to happen.
Because it could be one day, it could be a bit like when you read the headlines about the air traffic control system being down and thousands of people sleeping at the airport. Questions being asked in the House, that could happen with the insurance market, couldn't it?
It could quite conceivably happen. And I think, as far as I'm aware, the regulators had a look at it and thought, this is not necessarily great, so you need to do something about it. And nobody could disagree. It absolutely has to be done. Arguably, yes, if it had been attended to incrementally over the last 20 years, we wouldn't be in this situation now. But it wasn't, so nothing we can do about the past. We have to fix this as a market. We can't really have aspirations to being a digital market whilst we've got such an old legacy system at the core. We need to be more modern. And I suppose that then takes us on to phase two. And I think, as far as I can ascertain, I mean, I'm not particularly close to this, the jury's still out now on how phase two is going to work, what it's exactly going to look like. We talked about the core data record and how that's going to be used and how it's going to allow data to flow from the broker community through into the bureau and so on and so forth. But I don't think we've actually nailed it down quite yet, how that's going to work. And that's perfectly reasonable. This is difficult market re-engineering that's going to affect every player in the market. But let's get the first phase done. That's absolutely critical. Then we've got some modern technology at the core that's supported by a vast number of people rather than just a few aging people like me who can read COBOL or RPG or whatever the dreadful language is from 35 years ago. So let's get that done. And then we can talk about what this digital market's going to look like and how the CDR and other things are going to help support that aspiration.
Absolutely. But you are confident that it will happen?
No, definitely.
Within that, the new time frame. It's realistic.
I think we're paying perhaps a little bit too much attention to time frame. I'm trying to be scrupulously fair.
Thinking longer term about the benefits.
I think the long-term benefit of doing this is absolutely unquestionable. The long-term danger, actually, even the short to mid-term dangers of not doing it is becoming glaringly obvious. It has been a job that's needed to be done for a long time. So that kind of says to me, well, where's the rush, guys? We need to do this and we need to spend as much money as is necessary to get the job done. And if that takes an amount of time that's longer than we thought, so be it. It's a difficult job. It has to be done.
You know, if you've got $100 billion coming in and a similar number going out again, you know, 50, 60 going out, then that's a lot of money that cannot be misallocated, cannot suddenly not know where it's supposed to go.
No, we can't make mistakes with that sort of money, that sort of throughput. The market is very dependent on the Bureau, has been since forever.
You get your money at the end of the day, don't you?
Well, absolutely. And it's a system that works. We can't engineer it into a situation where it doesn't work, and therefore it has to take the amount of time that it's going to take. I'm absolutely not prepared to criticise anybody for what's going on.
Yeah.
It's an awful job that I would hate to have to do, and someone needs to do it.
This is like sort of laying a whole new sewage system, but without turning the water off.
Yes, it is very much that, yes.
What do you think the longer-term prize for that would be? One of the things I've always thought is that then London could become a global marketplace. I mean, it's already a global marketplace because it is writing business from all over the world. It's got licensing to match.
Yeah.
But you can't just press a button in Santiago, Chile and get things placed. You might be able to do that in the future.
Well, you might. And I think this is kind of opening up a pretty large area of discussion, I think. And to me, it's very interesting because what does a digital London insurance market look like? That, to me, is kind of the question. If you could draw a picture of what the digital market, there's been a lot of talk about, hasn't there, over the last few years about this is taking us towards being a digital market. This is a vital stepping stone to whether it's electronic placing or whether it's Blueprint 2 and InsurTech and all of these things, and now AI is snapping away over there. And they're all going to take us towards being a digital London market. But so far, I don't think anyone's actually drawn a picture of what one looks like and how far out from the hub that digital London market experience goes. So the question that you've kind of asked is someone sitting in Santiago or Guatemala can push a button.
Perhaps if they're a marsh broker, they know that they could got 30% of almost anything they want could have been pre-written on the Marsh London facility, for example.
Yes. Well, these things can happen now, but they can't happen at speed. So anything that the London market does now can be digitised to make it more efficient and faster and less prone to error, and all of the benefits that we all clearly understand can be had from being digital. But they've been done, and they are being done constantly in an analogue way. So somebody sitting in Santiago or Guatemala or whatever could theoretically, within a digital world, dial up some sort of capacity from somewhere that's completely remote through a distribution chain that's pretty frictionless and get that capacity from London, and within a very short space of time can get that bound. I mean, that's kind of the theory. I think we are a long, long way away from that. And I suppose it's back to the question, what does the digital London market actually look like and how far does it go? If we achieve our aspirations that we have in London, let's say we've got the bureau re-engineered and we've got the back office processes now digital, let's say, well, I'm going forward a few years, but let's do that. And then we've got the electronic placing systems and they're all data first. And that's great, so that we've got data flowing between the brokers and the underwriters. I don't think anyone's going to argue too much that that's kind of what a digital London market looks like.
Yes.
So we've now got a digital hub, but we've still got analogue spokes, if you like. This is, to me, where the intellectual challenge comes, because we've got an enormous number of spokes, haven't we, leading out from the London market. And those are where the business comes down. So, and they might be quite bent and twisted as well. There might be lots of stop-off points along the way. We've all got stories about how many hops that business took before it got into the market and all the rest. Some are very direct, obviously, in your analogy of a marsh broker sitting in Santiago or whatever.
Yes, of course, but as we know that it could have gone to a local MGA via and then some sort of paper, then reinsurance and another MGA and whatever, and it could have touched 10 hands before it got here.
Well, absolutely. And are we complaining that it came here? No, it came here expensively, but we wrote the business. We must have written it profitably.
Well, we're hoping we were.
Let's pretend. So the question to me is really more about, are we looking to digitise the spokes? How far do we go with this? And if we're not going to do that, there's an interface at some stage in the process between the analogue world outside the London market and the digital world within. And that, to me, is, as an end state, that's a bit awkward.
But also sounds like a good business opportunity for you, though.
Oh, cracking. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say no more on the subject.
You'll turn the analogue into digital when it needs to be. And of course, and I suppose the spokes will become digital when they need to be, won't they?
Well, I suppose they will. And it'll vary very much depending on the type of business and how that business is coming into London as to whether it's appropriate to digitise it, whether it can be digitised, and who's going to pay for that, who's going to be the ultimate beneficiary of that channel becoming digital, because there must be some benefit to doing it. Otherwise, who's going to bother? Everyone's in this for business reasons, not...
There was that moment when your stockbroker went online in 1999.
Yeah.
You still probably phone them up and tell them to buy and sell shares because it didn't make much difference. But these days, if you hadn't had an internet connection in the last few years, you really couldn't have traded any stocks. It was almost impossible very expensive to pick up the phone.
Well, absolutely.
And so you kind of get the message at that point. You say, well, I better integrate myself into this digital system because this is how we do it now.
Yeah, but is that where we want to go with insurance?
Well, I suppose the thing is, then it should be, I'm doing it because it's way better that way, and I'm going to have a better business if I do it that way. I'm going to make more money if I do it that way, so therefore I'm going to do it yesterday.
Yes.
So as long as you have the right incentive, I can do twice as much business.
Well, that applies to very much as an argument to anybody in the distribution chain and anybody in the underwriting business. But how about the customer? We kind of forget these people sometimes. These people who spend 100 billion quid a year with us.
I suppose if they get cover 100% more certain what is placed with whom under what terms.
Yes.
And that covers confirmed much more quickly. You probably have increased capacity available to them more quickly as well. And also, if your claims are played very quickly as well.
Yes.
Lightning fast, as soon as the leader agrees the money's in your account, that would be a nice thing to have.
It certainly sounds like they would. I think everybody, in order for this, I suppose, digital nirvana of everything being digitised, in order for that to be achieved, I think everybody has to be a part of the change.
Customers should be happy. The rights of customers, digital customers should be happy because, of course, they'll be sharing information that they're happy to share because they know that the underwriter and the broker between them will have a better view of their risk and give them better pricing.
Yes, absolutely.
Be able to see that they're a better risk and also help them. They'll be able to avoid claims more quickly as well, because you might have an underwriter at the other end looking at almost a live data feed and saying, by the way, I've got a team of engineers. You need to stop starting that turbine up the way you're doing it. You could send them an alert because it could be much more connected.
Well,
because if you're talking about data really flowing.
That's a very interesting vision of the future, without question of doubt, because insurance is becoming a sort of interactive exercise with risk management on a sort of 24/7 basis.
And we're seeing that with obviously the more technological classes like cyber, where it's really become that. It's become the sort of extra fire service. The funny thing is, of course, insurance started as a fire service and it's now come full circle.
Yes.
Something I'd like to ask you is, you've got your digital placing software. Others do exist, of course, and it's a competitive market, and without a competitive market, you wouldn't be spurred on to make your version better than everyone else's. Mm-hmm. But would it be better, though, to have a central placing hub where effectively we just send each other little messages and they go in and out of this big database? It's quite interesting because, of course, if I want to place business with your software, then the underwriter's got to use your software as well to sort of receive the message. It's not like the opposite of a telephone where it goes to an exchange, you just need to buy a telephone.
So going back to the early 2010s, something PPLs was first conceived in around about 2012. It was conceived as a market utility, and one of the attractive ideas of it was that the underwriters would only need to log in to a single platform in the morning to see what submissions that they had.
Of course, you get a single point of failure, but at the same time you have a whole load of less inconvenience.
Yes, and the market would pay for that and so on and so forth. And without question, it was the right approach in order to prime the pump, if you like, to kickstart the electronic trading revolution, because I'm absolutely of the opinion that no technology company could have done that. It needed to be done at a market level by a market association. And the silly analogy I use is that the great and the good stood around a flagpole in the middle of the market, put their right hands on their left chest and swore allegiance to the cause. And that's how PPL got going. And technology company couldn't have done that. Multiple technology companies competing against one another couldn't have done that. So a single utility was born. Obviously, it took a while to get off the ground. In fact, it was probably like pulling teeth for far too long. And I think we're all grown up enough to be able to agree that the deal was fundamentally sealed by COVID. That changed people's perception and working practice enough to make electronic trading non-threatening and slightly more attractive than it had been perceived.
So once we got over that hump, obviously it's right to go back to a more competitive environment because everyone's already sold the concept.
Well, whether it's right or not, it's happened. That ship has sailed. There is no chance of going back to that unless there are significant commercial failures within the technology companies, such as ourselves, providing placing technology to the market participants. But also, there are broking firms who have developed and are in the process of developing their own trading software as well. So even if the technology companies thought, we'll get out of this and go and sell ice creams for a living, that's not going to change the Vista because there will be multiple trading platforms. Whether it's good or not for the market, I don't know.
What's bad is to have a sort of monopolistic utility which then doesn't upgrade itself as quickly as it should do.
We may well have evidence of that occurring in the past.
This is what Blueprint 2 is all about.
It is exactly in many ways, it's what Blueprint 2 is all about. I suppose it's undoing the problems of the past slowly and expensively.
This is the way to do it. And I suppose with these things, if you don't want to log into 4 different platforms, you can probably build your own sort of viewing platform above all the platforms so it's integrated with all the platforms. Of course, you as competitors could integrate with each other, or to say, you'd like to use my front end, but actually I'll allow you to get the other end of somebody else's in.
Well, I think we need to be sort of reasonably careful about what integration means and what sort of benefits it'll bring. So if there are multiple trading platforms, and there are, and if that's a future state that is desirable to market, which it should be because it breeds competition, it allows companies to choose the best user experience as appropriate for their people or their teams. I think the concept of monogamy is dead anyway, so you don't get the idea that a broking firm is going to use you for everything. You may be that they'll be using you for marine and somebody else for bloodstock and somebody else for fine art and species or whatever. And that seems to be happening across the market. No problem with that at all. So multiple competition allows that, but it should also drive price down. Now, the odd thing is that it's not. At the moment, it's gone the other way. Whereas 3-4 years ago, I suppose the value of electronic trading within the market was something like 25 to 30 million pounds a year. It's probably double that now on increased volumes, but not enough to justify that.
Okay. Well, what are you going to do about that, Jeff?
Well, I don't know if there's anything one can do apart from sell one software at the price that's appropriate for the customers.
But eventually it will work.
So there's going to come a sort of levelling off and normal competitive rules will hopefully apply. So the question is how do underwriters engage with multiple platforms? And should there be some sort of integration between the platforms? Well, the answer is, first of all, the underwriters could theoretically engage with, as you say, some sort of a view that's a view over the platforms. But that's going to be quite expensive to engineer if it's going to allow them never to go onto any of the platforms and it will synthesize all those different functions. I'm not too sure that's realistic. It'd be very, very expensive to engineer. And of course, you'd have to keep it up to date constantly with all the platforms changing as they do. You'd have to try and keep that up to date. But far better to integrate at a data level so that you can receive data from the platforms in a standard format. A core GRLC springs to mind, and then that can then be used to provide the underwriters with a workflow that they can triage and prioritize their submissions and carry on from there. So that would seem to be the easiest solution to that. Whether the platforms themselves should be talking to one another or not, I think it's a slightly different question. Would you think that maybe a broker is sitting there and looking at capacity available on, I don't know, PPL and saying, well, I've got 3 or 4 underwriters here, but there's one here who's not available on PPL. They're only available on Placing Hub or something like that.
Yeah.
And so to go through to that underwriter via their own onto another one, that sounds to me like a very complex piece of engineering that I can't see
it'd be
working.
Easy just to quickly log out of this one, well, leave that one open, put it in another window, log in the other one. You probably logged into all 3 at the same time anyway.
I think the solution is actually somewhat simpler, is that, in fact, all of the placing platforms will fundamentally have access to all of the markets that they need for the brokers, so that there is fundamentally an overlap, a Venn diagram, 100% overlap between all of the platforms, which then just makes it much, much easier. You can get to your markets, regardless of who and where they are, on any platform you like. When that would change probably is if we're looking at overseas markets. Yeah. If a broker is placing a certain amount of business into London and then doing the rest, for example, if they're working from Germany and they're placing a percentage domestically and all the rest of it, then that's going to change without question of doubt. But for London, I think 100% coverage for all platforms is a must, if they need it. If it's a specific platform for a broker and they're only doing a certain class of business on it, then the coverage only needs to be for the underwriters writing those classes, obviously.
Going back to that user experience, and obviously that's one of the things that you're competing on. You say, well, this is better than the main platform most people use. Something that people have lamented over time is that brokers have often used these systems as almost like a backfill of something that they've already done, of trades that they've already sort of done on a whole load of phone calls and emails and everything else. Yeah. Do you think there's evidence now that your user experience is getting so good that people are actually spending time in the platforms pre-transaction, getting their quotes and chit-chat done through it?
Well, there's a lot in that question, so let's deal with the easy one first. Let's talk about quotes. The ambition of electronic trading, going back to the genesis of PPL, was that they wanted to do quotation, the full placement cycle on the platform. Quote, negotiate, bind.
It's the hard part, though, because it's hard to get the broker to use it.
Yeah.
Often because, as I say at the beginning, the user experience wasn't really there.
I think it's not completely because of the user experience wasn't there. I think even had we had sufficient time and budget to provide the ultimate user experience with all the bells and whistles, I think it would have still languished largely unused. I think it's fairly easy for practitioners to change their mindset regarding electronic trading when it comes to binding. That happens. COVID sealed the deal. Everybody did electronic trading to get to a bind on PPL, ignoring the timing issues at the moment. And that wasn't a major problem. Probably because most of the practitioners themselves were not necessarily involved in the process. They have assistants on both sides of broking and underwriting who are helping with that process. So the practitioners aren't walking around with an iPhone, if you like, doing the deals.
They've got technicians to help them out.
Yes, they've got the technicians and the assistants. Quoting's different. Quoting and negotiation need the people. And it's a long established practice in this market to do that business face to face.
Yeah.
We weren't trying to change that. PPL wasn't trying to change it. We were trying to get to the point where people were using the platform to exchange the data and the documents in order to make less mess and to create less administrative work whilst not changing their working practice.
I get it.
And that wasn't successful in quoting. That wasn't successful. I think perhaps there was probably more resistance to doing that because of the perceived and completely incorrect assumption that there was a threat to their positions should that be successful, a threat to the way they worked. And although it was pointed out by everybody from the great and the good all the way down that that was not the intention, there was, I think, a sort of latent suspicion that that might have been the direction of travel, should I say. And consequently, I think trying to do quoting electronically was way ahead of its time back in 2016. And I think it probably still is. And it may be more of a user experience issue now, but I'm not completely sure. So now let's look at the binding. So your question is fundamentally, why are people backloading already bound risks onto the platform? And the answer to that is I haven't the slightest idea. There are probably numerous reasons. And if you go back, for example, to the advent of the Lloyd's incentive, what was it called? The Lloyd's mandate, which I think was in 2018. So back then it was looking like PPL was going to be another unsuccessful attempt at getting electronic trading going. And so Lloyd's introduced a mandate to incentivize underwriters to bind and theoretically to penalize those that didn't. I don't know if that ever came to pass, but the incentive was certainly paid. And I think people fairly quickly realized that they could carry on doing exactly what they were doing, get some nice ink and a stamp, and then ask someone to scan it in, and then they could, at some convenient time, just rebind it electronically. And so you've got to be careful how you incentivize people, I guess, because they'll find the ways of achieving that quite quickly. We're still doing it now. We're doing it more now than we probably were then. I don't know what the stats are. I really don't, going back in time, whether this is a worsening problem over the last few years or whether it's actually been the case since the very start. But we've got a situation now where the vast majority of business is actually being bound late. And it's being bound late for reasons that I think were probably not foreseen when electronic trading was first thought about. And in many ways, it's because of the increasing burden of what's having to be done before you can bind. That's the burden largely on the broker. I think the problem's going to go away, and it will go away when we go data first, because the systems that have the data can then hand it straight over to the trading platform. It's already been validated. No one's got to do anything more with it. It's in systems, in the broking systems. It's come maybe via the distribution chain. And all it has to do is flow through to the underwriter. And that's seamless and immediate. And so we can then reduce all these things that we have to do before we can bind and then get them bound at the right time. So it's a little bit odd. I mean, I'd love to say that, in this case, all platforms aren't created equal, but I think they are actually in this case. It's the nature of the way things are being used rather than the things themselves.
Cause of the day now is the market uniting around the need for common data standards, the common data record.
Yes.
Being the X. Can you say that's the Accord standard, the global, you said the acronym, XLR?
Well, there's GRLC, which is the Global Reinsurance Large Commercial Standard.
I'll put a link to that in the notes. How important is it, though, to have common core data record standards in a world where, people are quite good at ingesting data in all different formats?
I think it's absolutely vital.
For the common stuff. This is for the accounting and settlement.
No, for anything. I think for the exchange of data that is pertinent to the risk, which is largely the stuff that comes with the placement process. Obviously, stuff's coming from other places as well, but what's going between the broker and the underwriter predominantly is in that placing pack. That data should be standardized, without question of doubt. I don't think anybody could dispute that. And then when it comes to the post-bind process for accounting and settlement, that absolutely has to be standardized. And the Accord GRLC standard has been around for 20 plus years. I think it was 2002. It was introduced, and it's used probably more than anything by the Rushlicon community, which is the non-bureau accounting and settlement stuff. Millions of transactions being done a year using that, and perfectly good, does the job. It's a much more difficult job with placing, as you might imagine. There's an awful lot of data, and there's a huge amount of variation in the data between different classes of business. And then there's a much more complex workflow going backwards and forwards. So it is more difficult, but the data standard itself, if you're going to send somebody data, you should be sending it fundamentally in a GRLC standard if it is able to be used for that exchange. And if it's not, then perhaps somebody should be talking to Accord to get the standards stretched.
Absolutely, we need those common building blocks.
Without question of doubt, we do. And we've had an announcement last month from the market associations and Lloyd's and various others imploring the market to adopt the GRLC standard. And you may have seen the PR stuff.
Do you think we might end up with a similar sort of incentive/carrots and stick approach?
Perhaps. But the problem for me with that announcement, absolutely unarguable that it was. It's like saying that I think really, guys, we should be breathing air.
So it's as fundamental as that.
It doesn't require a great deal of debate. The problem is how we should be using it and why. And that's about strategy. So we can't just sort of serendipitously as a market go and invent ways of sending each other stuff using the standards, because we'll have cats herding cats. And the way we've traditionally done things in the market is we've sat down and decided how we're going to use these standards, for what purpose, what's the data flow, when are we going to use it, and what the benefits are, and everyone. Then we can all go away and engineer systems to do that. And that to me seems to be a little bit missing. Maybe it's coming, I don't know.
One thing the Blueprint 2 process has shown us, of course, it's great to own your own technology, but at the same time, it's also terrible to own your technology because this terrible paradox.
Yes.
I mean, ultimately, should a market like the London market own its own technology fundamentally because it's important that it is in charge of it? Also, with the warts and all the things that comes with it. It's a fundamental question.
I think it's oversimplified, if I may, because it's confusing the notions of ownership with control. And I don't think it's particularly healthy to be completely focused on who owns something. I think Lloyd's have proved reasonably well that they can still inhabit that central piece of market infrastructure called the Lloyd's building, despite having flogged it 20 years ago. And so they lease it. So I don't think it is true to say that the market has to own its own technology.
So it's really about control.
It's about partnership and it's about control. Clearly, the market needs to have control over its software. And it doesn't matter how it gets that software. It's contractually how it's allowed to control it that counts. And it's more, to me, to do with the partnership. So even if the London insurance market builds a piece of technology tomorrow, using its own resources, recruited at great cost from wherever they are coming from, the market or outside the market, they put them all in a room, and 100 man years later, they come up with this fantastic piece of kit. And they say, well, it's ours, we own it. Well, no, it's not. It's not even from the minute you started doing that, because it's been written using a programming language that's not yours. It's using a database management system that's probably Oracle's or somebody else's that you're paying for. You're probably leasing all the kit that it's running on these days. You've got it running in Azure and all the rest of it. So where's this ownership thing come from? You own the intellectual property to it,
Yeah.
but pretty much everything else you're now relying on.
So we shouldn't be hung up on this.
Well, and then you say, okay, well, we need to do something that we can't do. We need a partnership with somebody. We need to go off and partner with Microsoft or partner with whoever, right? And that's the way these things work. They always work like that. So you don't really have that ownership. Anyway, what you should be looking at, focusing much more, is on the profitable and valuable partnership between the market and its vendors. And I think historically, we haven't quite got that right. There's very often, you find there's way too much friction between the market and its vendors when it comes to providing central functionality, market infrastructure. Quite dissimilar from the way that individual practitioner firms have relationships with vendors. They're usually much more productive and then far more partnership-based, largely. I mean, there's always upsets. But by and large, underwriting broking companies have good relationships with their software vendors. But the market itself, when it tries to do that, then has a more fractious relationship.
Yes.
And I think that's the problem that needs to be addressed, and not getting so quite hung up on whether we're leasing the software or whether we own it, or whether we've outsourced the builds to a third-party firm, which we do.
Very few people own their offices either, as you've already pointed out.
So, yeah.
So, Jeff, we couldn't be sitting around in 2025 talking about technology and not talk about AI. You've probably known about this since before it was called AI and it was called machine learning and all the other stuff. I'm sure we've been experimenting with it to help write some of your code. I would have thought we would be good at that.
How dare you?
Writing code with less bugs than humans do, for example. What do you think, as a technologist, where are the best use cases you've found?
So I'm going to fess up a little bit to this, is that we as a company are looking at AI quite closely, and we're looking to see where we can implement AI tactically, if you like, into some of the products in order to provide an improved user experience or something that can't be done at the moment with ordinary code or would take centuries. So can we build AI in? But personally, I don't know an enormous amount about AI. I mean, there are plenty of experts in AI who probably give you much, much better answers than I'm about to try and give you. But the way I see it is that at the moment, I can see that AI is definitely having effects in, I suppose, quite surgical ways, down in the detail for specific processes, for specific solutions that are needed. AI is becoming quite interesting. Summarizing documents, it's blooming good at that. And these large language models, they can read through a complex London insurance market contract, a 50-pager, and come up with the salient points pretty quick, much, much faster than a human being can do. Can they do it completely accurately? I don't know. Is somebody going to be completely reliant on that sort of thing? I don't know. I'm not going to try and even guess. I'd probably be a little worried. We've all used AI and we've probably all gone, my God, how the hell did it do that? Go on to Google Gemini or whatever, ask for something and then say, can you give me the more researched version? And 5 minutes later, you'll come back with a sort of 15-page report that would have taken you a week of researching to do. Is it all right? I mean, the stuff I've tried, it's been very, very good. But I think if we're looking at very, very targeted use of AI, in certain circumstances where the underlying information that it's using is known to be correct, I think AI has got an enormous amount to offer.
If I ever talk to a software vendor and they use the words future-proof, I always think they're lying. I'm not sure if you agree with me. Do you think AI might be one of the ways of future-proofing the market? Because, as soon as we implement a new system, we know, the day you implement it, it's not quite the day it becomes obsolete, but the time is ticking. Could AI, perhaps as a technologist, be the thing that will help a system re-engineer itself and keep itself up to date without having to be ripped out and put back in again?
No.
Oh, well, that's good. I like one-word answers.
I'm really not convinced, I have to say. I've never been convinced about the phrase future-proof anyway, and I hope I've never used it personally.
So, yes, future-proof, best of breed and scalable. Well, I think everything's scalable.
I've used both of those more than once. Sorry. I don't know. I think we're sort of beginning to get the idea that AI is going to be able to do an awful lot of stuff like that. And I'm not even completely convinced from what I've seen that AI is going to be completely reliable at the moment for even writing relatively short pieces of code. But that's 2025. I think if we have this discussion in 2030, it's going to be completely different and, in my mind, even more worrying. I think used at a micro level, used at a specific task level, and provided the underlying data that it's using is good and is reliable, I think we can have an awful lot of good stuff out of AI. If we just look at the example outside of this market, let's take the medical profession. If AI can be trained to look at mammograms and CT scans and all the rest of it and find cancers that would take human beings weeks of effort to try and locate and then still have a failure rate of 40% or something. If AI is doing that, then that's absolutely brilliant. So back into the market now, if AI is doing particular jobs and is helping people with particular jobs, then that's on a targeted basis. That seems to be what's going on at the moment anyway. And I'm perfectly happy with that. It's when people start talking about AI at a macro level that I start getting a little bit skeptical.
System level, then you don't want something systemic playing with the system.
AI can fix that. The people say, well, our data's not very good. Well, it doesn't matter because AI can fix that. Well, not entirely sure that's right. And there's going to be an awful lot of mistakes and some fairly costly lawsuits when someone proves that it wasn't. Yeah. So I think AI could be very useful, for example, in helping integrate systems. So you've got this thing here that talks French and this thing here that talks German, in technological terms. Ask the AI to just make them talk, and half an hour later it's come up with some software that does the mapping between the APIs. That strikes me as being a perfectly valid and reasonable use for AI. That sort of thing is relatively straightforward. I think it becomes a little bit dangerous when we start thinking about AI as an emerging technology, which it is, being treated as if it's a panacea. Yeah. That I think is dangerous. Like self-driving cars. Don't get me started on those. I'll shut up.
Well, Jeff, probably the last question. You're the OG of insurance technology. You're the original InsurTech before InsurTech existed. The InsurTech phenomenon, as we've known it, as it was then named, has been around for a decade now.
It has.
It's coming up, I do remember probably the first InsurTech conferences I ended up organising were probably 2015, 2016. Anyway, we're coming up for the decade. And we've had billions of dollars of money poured into different investments. Some have been successful, plenty not. That's the nature of the beast, the sort of venture capital beast. What do you think the main lessons have been from this?
Lessons? Okay.
If we started from scratch, if we could go back in the time machine to 2015, what would we do differently?
I don't know if we'd want to do very much differently. I suppose, first of all, we need a little bit of a definition about what InsurTech actually means. So for the purposes of my answer, InsurTech is about technology companies providing technology to insurance companies. It's not about lemonade, for example, and a technology-based insurance company. That's completely outside of my field of understanding. So I'm going to limit my answer to technology companies selling insurance. And then there's a sort of nuance to that, is that although my company sells insurance technology, I don't think we're an InsurTech in inverted commas. I think you need to be newer, a bit more exciting, a bit more edgy, smaller, startup. I'm probably wrong with that definition, but I'm going to stick with that. So a lot of money, yes, has been invested in those sorts of companies by the market. And as you rightly say, some of it's been successful, some of it hasn't. And again, I think a lot of the successful things have been things where they're specifically targeting individual functions, individual problems within individual organizations, laser focused on that particular issue, whatever it is. And quite right, they've absolutely worked. But on a macro level, not so much. I don't see any InsurTech any longer that's trying to change the London insurance market. Those ambitions, they came and went pretty fast, I think, in the first few years of the InsurTech revolution. Lots of people came swanning around the market, maybe experienced in other markets, maybe not, with an ideology and some financial backing, and thought, well, you guys, you should be doing things differently and we're going to help solve those problems. And someone needed to tap them on the shoulder and say, well, actually, we're a regulated industry and here's 17 reasons why we can't do what you want to do. There was quite a lot of that going on at the time. So that was a useful learning exercise. I think one of the big success stories for InsurTech for me is the way it's changed the way the market thinks about technology. And to me, that's the biggest benefit. All right, apart from the billions of little pockets throughout the market, exaggerating slightly, but who've benefited specifically from their targeted solutions. I think the great thing for me is InsurTech and the Lloyd's Lab have allowed the insurance market to change the way they think and act with technology. They've now embraced it, whereas 15 years ago, they didn't. I'm being generous.
The opposite of embrace.
If you tipped up to a firm 15 years ago, like we did, 20 years ago, we got the first piece of technology we built is when we were Tri-Systems that wasn't big IBM green screen mainframey type technology. We built a package in one of the new modern languages, and it drew graphs and it did triangulations and it did all sorts of interesting stuff. And we thought, yeah, this is great. Everyone is going to want this. No, it was...
Nobody wanted it.
Well, one company. We had one company who was absolutely in love with it, spent a lot of money on it, and that was one. And nobody else. We couldn't get arrested with it. Well, the truth is our marketing was rubbish. I didn't really know how to sell software back in those days. Arguably still haven't learned, but never mind. But fundamentally, you couldn't walk into an underwriting company and say, I've got this wonderful thing on this CD-ROM. You've got to look at it. Because you couldn't even get in, never mind hand over the CD-ROM. There was no concept really.
And of course, now you could pitch up to the Lloyd's Lab, you could be at the pitch day pitching away, and you'd have people whose job it is to actually interact with you.
Absolutely. And there are companies that incubate startup technologies. They're under the wing of the Beasleys of this world. And
all that ecosystem to help you get through those doors you need to get through.
Absolutely. And could you imagine 10 years ago even just thinking, well, that's the way it's going to be now. And I think that's fantastic for the market. There was a time, I suppose, from between 1688 and around about 2010, where the market existed in spite of the technologists.
Yes.
And it got on just fine. And of course, all the evidence said it did. Look at the money we're making. I mean, even now it's very hard. I mean, if you look at the money that Lloyd's makes now and the hard market of the last few years and the Lloyd's numbers and things, you think all of that's going on because of insurance deals. It's not really because of all the technology. It's because people are doing good insurance deals, and we are a good insurance market. Yes, we want the technology to help us improve and all of those things, but fundamentally, we are the preeminent global insurance market, and we are allowed to make money. We're selling a premium product at a decent price. And I think that's the London market. So technology comes along and says, oh, we can make you better. Well, maybe 1% better, maybe 2% better, but it's not transformative. But I think the way that the whole conversation's changed about technology is all thanks to the massive influx of brave people, deluded people, all sorts, who are building insurance technology companies, doing crazy things and all the rest of it, a lot of them falling by the wayside. Darwin's in charge, we know that, he always has been, and that's changed it.
Jeff, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me. I've really enjoyed chatting, as ever.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
We must book in a time to chat at some point in the future.
That would be great, but meanwhile, a nice beer.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review or recommendation on whatever podcast platform you used to access this programme. These really help get the word out. Before we go, just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry. Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.